Oh, what's up, everybody? This is Objective 3 for the linear and exponential functions. All right, so before we kick off this Objective 3, just want to do a quick review of what an exponential function looks like in equation form, okay? There's two parts. The first part, which is in front of your parentheses, is your y-intercept. The next part is what you'll find in your parentheses, which also has the variable, x variable, and the exponent, is going to be your growth factor, okay? Also known as what you might consider the multiplication pattern, all right? Big thing is you remember the variable is in the exponent because the first part of exponential is exponent, okay? So in this objective, you guys are going to need to identify the y-intercept and the growth factor from a exponential function, okay? So first, we're going to start with g of x, okay? So if we look, our first number is 20 in front of our parentheses. And if we remember, the first part of our equation is the y-intercept. So in this equation, our y-intercept is 20. And then our growth factor is what is in the parentheses, all right? So here, our growth factor is going to be multiplying by 0.25, okay? Let's take a look at another function, all right? We have 6 raised to the x, okay? So here we have our parentheses, but we don't see a number in front. But if we remember from the beginning of the year, there is a number out here, and we don't write it, but it is the number 1, okay? So the number in front of our parentheses is our y-intercept. So here, our y-intercept is the number 1, okay? So you're going to see this a few times on your quiz. If there's no number in front of the parentheses, the y-intercept, or the number out front, is the number 1, and your y-intercept is 1. And now again, our growth factor is what we see in the parentheses. So here, our growth factor is 6, okay? So now if we see a table, this is a little different, okay? So if we remember, we've talked about this a little bit, but the y-intercept, and for all y-intercepts, is the y value for when x equals 0, okay? So in your table, you want to figure out when x equals 0, what is the y value, okay? So here, when x equals 0, the corresponding y value is 50, so our y-intercept is 50, okay? Now, if we want to find the growth factor, you want to look at your numbers and see if you could recognize the pattern going on, okay? It's either going to be multiplication or a division pattern. If you cannot figure it out just by looking at it, we are going to use our calculator, okay? So I take my calculator, and what I do is I take a number and I divide it by the number right before it. So I'm going to do 100 divided by 200. Then I take 50 divided by the number right before it. So I take 50 divided by 100. I continue that, 25 divided by 50. 12.5 divided by 25. And each time I get 0.25. So this tells me my growth factor is multiplying by 0.5. Okay? So let's take a look at another example. This is an exponential function in the table. Okay? My y-intercept is the y value when x equals 0. So when x equals 0, my y value is 108. So what's my y-intercept? 108. My growth factor is going to be the pattern. Okay? Here, if I can't recognize the pattern just by looking at it, again, use your calculator, and to find the pattern, we divide. I take 18 divided by the number before it. Take 108 divided by the number before it, which is 18. Take 648 divided by the number before it, 108, and I see each time I get the number 6. So my growth factor is multiplying by 6, okay? So last thing for this video is a real quick review of recognizing a graph that matches a table or equation. So remember, the first part is our y-intercept. So I go to my graph. Here, my y-intercept is at 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now I see my growth factor is less than 1. okay? So whenever your growth factor is less than 1, okay? Or then we know that my equation is going to be decreasing, okay? So and if we look at our table, my y-intercept in my table is at 4, which matches the y-intercept of this graph. And my numbers are going down, which means it's a decreasing function, which is exactly what I see in this function right here. Okay? So we're going to look at one more example really quick. Okay? Here, all right, I see an equation. My number out front is the y-intercept, which is 2. And if I look at my equation, the y-intercept is at 2. And then now I look at my growth factor. My growth factor is greater than 1 now, okay? So if your growth factor is greater than 1, we know it's going to be an increasing function. So we can tell our graph is increasing because it's going up. All right, and we can also see that in our table. When x equals 0, the y-intercept is 2, which matches my graph. And here, my numbers are going up. As I go further down my table, they get bigger, just like my graph. All right, so good luck, and we got one more video on asymptotes.